Hello there, my name is Jason Schmaltz and I'm an AMGA Rock Guide Apprentice, and today I'm going to continue my Jim to Crag series talking about some basic techniques that you can use to either get outside for the first time with friends and family, or if you're already doing that, maybe refine some of your skills and learn some new ways to do some stuff. And today I'm going to talk about all things tree anchors, which is a common thing that you'll use your first couple times outside if you're going somewhere with a family or with friends and you want to do some top roping, let everybody get a turn. Maybe it's not on the most established routes, or if you're doing multi-pitch climbing, you're inevitably going to run into a place where you need to do a tree anchor. So I'm going to go over all kinds of different cases, and you can pick the one that's best for the situation that you're in. Try to give the pluses and minuses of each. So if you're going to use tree anchors, one of the most common setups is going to be what's called a top managed site. So you will be belaying from the top, and then you'll have people down below you that'll be climbing up and then being lowered back off. So I'm going to show you some of the top managed systems first. I'll give you kind of the pluses and minuses of each. First, I'll give you the most simple one, which is if you have a triple length or quad length sling and the tree is skinny enough to wrap it around, you can take the strands and do, I like to just finish with a square knot. And so now everything's redundant, and you can either connect to this master point with a personal anchor system like the Petzl Connect Adjust, or for me, I'll usually just use the climbing rope and do a clove hitch. I can adjust it to where I'm going to be able to see my climber. And then once hooked into the master point, I would pull rope until I got to my climber below and set them up on a gree-gree or some other belay device. I go ahead and connect that to the same master point, get them situated in, lock that down, and now I can belay them up. And once they get up, I can redirect the brake strand and lower them back down. If you want to see that technique, you can watch some of my other videos. Advantages to this system: it's pretty easy to understand how it works, pretty easy to find the master point, easy not to tie, easy to remember. Disadvantage is if the tree is larger, you can't use this because the sling or the cordelette isn't big enough to get around. And additionally, you have to have the extra material. And then lastly, if you're on this for a long time, sometimes a square knot can be a pain in the butt to untie. So those are some things to keep in mind. But overall, this is a pretty simple system, basic, and if it's your first time using some tree anchors, might be a good one to use because it's pretty easy to explain to anybody. Another way to use a tree anchor and belay from the top is to use the climbing rope itself. Here's a really easy one that you can do if you can walk around the tree easily. So you simply walk around the tree, pull some extra slack through, get some material enough to tie a BHK or an overhand with 2 bights. And there's my master point. From there, I can go ahead and set up my gree-gree in the same manner and belay my climber up. If I tie my BHK with just enough tether where I can step back to the cliff's edge and feel safe, that's fine. If I have too much tether, I can clove into this as well, just like I showed you on the last master point. So you can kind of pick what best suits the situation. Advantages of this anchor system is obviously it's simpler. I'm only using one piece of material. I'm using the climbing rope, which is nice beefy climbing rope, so always feel good on that. One of the disadvantages of this is sometimes it's hard to walk around a tree. That might sound funny, but a lot of times I've come up to top managed sites and there's either rocks or something close to the tree or all these bushes and thorns that I don't really want to walk through. So this may not be feasible with that type of setup. In the case that you can't walk around the tree but you want to use the climbing rope for the anchor, go ahead and pull some slack through and get a bight, and you can tie what's called a Connecticut Tree Hitch. So take that bight, fling it around the tree, and then what's important is you take the bight, put it on the tree like that. I put like my hand on it, and then take the non-working end, 2 strands, and put that over top of the bight. Pull the strands from the bight in front of those non-working ends and clip the bight strands with the carabiner and lock down. From here I can tighten it and I can belay off this. Go ahead and do the same BHK knot, because you don't want to like clip to one of these strands or something, because you'll start pulling rope through. So you want to close it up with this BHK knot. And from here again, I'm putting my gree-gree on and belaying my partner up. I'll adjust my tether as needed. Advantage of this system is that it's super fast. It can go around any diameter tree. Disadvantage is you are giving up a piece of hardware. If you're limited on carabiners, you may not want to do that. Additionally, this one you can sometimes tie incorrectly. If you mess up and you put the bight in the front, and then you try to pull the non-working strands through the bight like this, clip it, I'm just locking like I normally would, you can get a false sense of security because it doesn't fail right off the bat. But if I just wiggle it a little bit, it'll fail. So that's something to be careful with the Connecticut Tree Hitch. You want to make sure you put that bight in the back and pull those strands in the front and clip them versus the other way around. The last option for building a tree anchor for a top managed site with the climbing rope is a Bowline with a Beckett Finish. Okay, so what you're going to basically do is again get a bight similar to the Connecticut Tree Hitch and throw that around the tree. And from here we need to first tie a bowline. So you want to do a snap bowline because you want the bowline to be upside down. You don't want the tongue part of the bowline to be facing up if you were to tie it in the traditional manner. Just makes it a little bit easier to deal with. So there's my bowline right there. And you can see on the bottom side is the tongue, but I tied it with the snap bowline method, so it's upside down. And then instead of finishing the bowline with the overhand, I wrap around the outside of the loop going around the tree, kind of go halfway around, and then go back through the tongue. Kind of like a Yosemite finish, and it would be a Yosemite finish if it was one strand, but the Beckett finish refers to the loop that's created. From there, it's that loop that I can clip into and belay my partners up. I can clove myself into if I want to and go from there. So advantage of this knot is that there's no hardware. It can wrap around any tree and you don't have to walk around the tree. So those are the advantages. The disadvantage is it's a little bit of a complex knot, and it would be hard for somebody to come up and check you because it's kind of specialized. But if you can tie a bowline, you're kind of halfway there, and just do the Beckett finish versus the traditional overhand finish, and you can go from there. Okay, so the last style of tree anchor I'm going to show you is called a Joshua tree anchor, and you would want to use this style of anchor most likely if you're going to have a bottom managed site. So if you already looked at some top managed sites, this is where you're up top, taking pictures, letting people up and down, but you're always at the top. But if you want to be down with the family, having a picnic, and then, oh, we go climb top rope whenever it feels like, you would want to maybe think about this style of anchors. So there's multiple styles of Joshua tree anchors. I'm going to show you one that offers a couple extra features, but it's not overly complicated, and it's called the N-rig Joshua tree anchor, and you'll see why it's called that in just a second because it looks like an N. So for these purposes, we're going to simulate like my driveway right here is the cliff edge. So I don't want to get anywhere near the cliff edge while I'm setting up this anchor unprotected. We don't want to have any kind of accidents while we're out with the family. So the first thing we want to do is find one anchor and build a personal tether off of it that then we can then build the rest of the system with. So we'll use this tree for our first anchor, we'll use that one for our second, and you'll see that they'll come together like a V. But then I'll have my tether off of this tree, they'll come off as a separate line, and the V plus that separate line will make it look like an N, and you'll see that in just a second. When I'm making Joshua tree anchors, I like to have the rope in a single butterfly coil around my neck because you need a lot of rope for it, but you don't want your rope all over the place, and you gotta kind of walk around. So I kind of take out the amount of rope that I'm gonna need for each part of the anchor and then leave the rest in the coil. So to make my tether, I want to have a tether system that can definitely get me to all the places I need to go, including the cliff edge. So a couple coils out, let's see if that works. And that's going to probably be about the right distance. And I'll go ahead and close this end with a barrel knot. And then to connect to this monolith anchor, I'm going to use a Bowline on a Bight with an overhand finish. So I like to, again, use the snap Bowline. That's the fastest, easiest one to tie, and that can go right in the middle of this rope. That's the advantage of this knot. I don't have to just do it on a single strand and then guesstimate. I can just do it anywhere I want. So now I have my tether and then the strand coming up to my rope coil off this first Bowline with an overhand finish. So I'll go ahead and take my gree-gree and put myself on this tether so it's easily adjustable. I'll lock it down and now I can go anywhere, and the furthest that I'm going to get is this barrel knot. So now I can operate safely up here without fear of falling to my death off the cliff in front of my family. So from here, the next thing I need to do is go ahead and get enough rope to get out to where my master point's going to be. Now normally with a Joshua tree anchor, we're going to want a master point hanging over the cliff. We don't want our climbing rope that we'll be using running on the cliff up here because there's going to be too much friction, not going to really be able to operate very well. So we want enough rope to go over our cliff. Now it doesn't have to be perfect. Just get enough that you know you're going to be able to tie a BHK master point, and we can come back to it. We can do something with the remainder of the slack on the BHK. So you don't have to sit here and measure it out to the last centimeter. The other thing to keep in mind is that if our cliff edge is sharp, we're going to need something to protect this rope from that cliff edge, because this rope is going to be static, and if we got kids and stuff moving around the rock and dragging this all over the place, then the same area is going to be getting exposed to a sharp edge and we could have an accident, so we don't want that. So if there is a sharp edge here, use a towel, use a backpack, something that gets that off that sharp edge. But this is definitely enough material to tie a master point, and so I will continue to let out slack from my rope to get to my other monolith tree anchor here. And I definitely have enough, so I can put the rest of my rope pile down right here. No need to utilize the rest. And then I can do the same knot as I did over there. Bowline on a Bight with an overhand finish. Okay, I just finished my second knot, so now I can come down and make my master point. Now I want to look over the edge, and I can do so because I'm on my tether, I'm safe. I can't go much further than the edge. My tether won't let me, which is great. So I want to look over the edge and get this lined up and kind of pre-equalize between these two trees on where my party's going to be climbing up. From there, remember what I said, I want to measure it out so that my master point is going to be over the edge. Okay, so if I tie a BHK kind of right in this area, that's going to be perfect. Well-dressed BHK. Then I have this remainder tail. So you can see my master point perfectly right over the edge. Now, textbook-wise, you don't have to do anything with this tail. This BHK knot will remain tight. This tail can't pass back through, but a lot of people get nervous. So you can, you're more than welcome to do an overhand finish with the remaining tail, just to have it backed up. Sometimes if people want to get extra cautious, they'll just clip that tail loop with one of the strands. You could do all those things. From a textbook perspective, it's not necessary, but if you're not going to be up here for a long time, you may want to do a couple of those extra measures so you just don't have to think about it, and it's not a big deal. From there, to finish off my master point, I need to have two opposite and opposed carabiners that I'll hook another rope inside as my top rope and throw it down, and then we're off to the races. Of course, those will be locked as well with the rope inside. Now, look at the tether and my V-rig, and you can see it makes an N, and that's why it's called the N-rig. Couple other things to note about Joshua Tree anchor. You want to make them with static rope. Static rope will provide minimal give as people load and unload the anchor system. So all the knots will stay in place, the rope will stay where you expect it, versus using climbing rope. If you don't have a static rope, I'd recommend getting one that's maybe 150 feet or so. I've found that to be very useful for all the anchors I've had to build like this. An extra point to make on tree anchors is they can be considered monolithic anchors, meaning you don't have to have two of them. A good litmus test for knowing if you can treat a tree as a monolithic anchor versus needing an extra tree for backup is if it's bigger than your thigh. So as you can see, this tree is very much bigger than my thigh. I would not feel the need to back up any system that I attach to this tree. Hey, I hope you found this video useful on tree anchors. They can be quite useful both in top rope and multi-pitch applications, and the more of these anchor systems that you know, the more flexible you can be depending on the scenario you're given. You can save a lot of time in anchor building by using some of these techniques, which means that you can increase the amount of fun climbing time that you get to have each day. Hey, hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you out of the crag.